All right, here we are. Here we are. Welcome to our weekly hypnosis talks with me, Jasiah, and Pete. And today we wanted to continue our conversation from last week to just go in more depth with imagination, imaginative play, with, the title being imagination and imaginative play. It's not just for kids. And just to explore really the power of imagination, um, using it, how it's really um, been used throughout time, written, documented, and undocumented around the world, and then how it's really showing up in the science world, being proved as science often needs to do. And so we wanted to just talk about that ways that as a practitioner, you can use it in your practice. And that I'm sure you do, just having, gotten certified, but just going deeper into that. And then also, if you wanted to do stuff for yourself, how you might be able to use it. And also tying in how to convince yourself that you can. So, this is the platform for today. So, Pete, tell us a bit more about convincing yourself that you can.
Yeah, and it really ties into the imagination. So if we think of anything that exists today, it starts with someone's imagination. It doesn't matter if it's the first wheel, doesn't matter if it's the newest Tesla. It all started in someone's mind going, I can make this better, or I need this, or I want this, or I have a goal for this, right? Everything starts in our imagination. Um, and it's stuff where it's interesting. So you think of, I say more, famous as far as popularly known. You go into Thomas Edison. He would talk about how he would go into his mind to invent something and then bring it into the reality of life. You know, um, Ben Franklin used to kind of do the same thing where he would hold a spoon and he'd have a cast iron pan. And when he fell asleep, he would drop the spoon, hit the pan, it would wake him up, and he would come up with brilliant ideas. Then you go into, more in our industry, there's Wallace Waddles, there's Napoleon Hill, there's Andrew Carnegie, and all right, so many people throughout history started with just an idea, which is just a thought in our imagination. You know, even the platforms we're on now started in someone's imagination. So it's not just for kids, it's for everyone. So when it comes into our imagination, knowing how powerful it is, how it can create and destroy, it becomes how do we use it, right? And this is where I was thinking like convincing yourself that you can, right? You need to convince your mind, your imagination, that you can or have achieved or will achieve or already achieved, right? Everything you've desired. And the problem I think a lot of us run into with that is um, we get stuck in that we need to fake it until we make it, right? Oh, I got to pretend. It's like, well, no. Yeah, when we already imagine that we have whatever our goal is, our desires, our outcomes, right? Whenever we imagine them, really what we're saying is we're firmly convinced in our own mind that I have the ability already inside me, right? And what we do is we're taking that ability already inside us and bringing it to the outside world. So it's not about pretending, it's not about faking it. It's literally about taking this ability that's already lying dormant within inside of us, bringing it to our creative mind, right? Our creative part, and really going, hey, it's time we bring this to the outside world for other people to experience, to see it, right? Now, what typically happens is we doubt our own ability. We go, well, that's a nice dream. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Right? That's what we typically do. right? And when we do that, this is what we're doing. We're using our imagination in the opposite way.
And those are also the limitations that you were talking about last week.
Right, right. These are the limitations. These are accepted thoughts and pictures in our mind of false suggestions, right? They come from, I would say, an unaware society that is very limited in their beliefs, right? They believe they can't do it. And so there's no way for them to impress upon us that we do have the ability to do it. And so it's up to us to use, to harness really our imagination, our ability to look inside ourselves, right? To look inside ourselves and our mind and our self image, our attitude, right? To go, I'm convinced that if I can imagine it, I can create it, right? And this is one where, man, science and history has proven this over and over again, right? As a little guy, right, as a little boy, lightsabers to me were the coolest thing in the world, right? It was in George Lucas's mind, right? Laser swords. It doesn't get much cooler than that. Fast forward to, I think it was 2021 or 2022. Someone literally created one. You know, he was able to take an imaginative thing from someone's mind and create it into something real, right? Certain things, we do have limitations as far as technology hasn't caught up to our thoughts, our imagination, right? That does happen, right? If you think of like the time machine, it's out there in our minds. It's just not out there in our reality yet, right? Because we're missing something, right? An understanding, a learning, something. And how I learned it, and I find it to be very accurate and true, is if we think of energy, which we're all made of, it can't be created and it can't be destroyed. That means everything that is ever going to be created in our universe already exists because the energy already exists. It just hasn't been brought into our physical form yet, our reality as we see it on the outside. And so really what we do is we got to harness our ability, our power to generate that confidence, right? The intuitive direction to bring anything we desire into life into our outside world.
So I just want to just interject and just say, like, I'm feeling a different element of power and understanding with that concept of, you know, that energy is just always transformed, that it's not, that it doesn't die. So that I just feel like that's something to really just kind of sink into for a minute, thinking about the power of your own manifestation and imagination, is that there is actually energy that once was, that's been transformed, that can be transformed again, that you can possibly cultivate or bring to you, especially when you're in a moment of maybe feeling powerless or feeling overwhelmed or feeling all like that there's no possible way. It's like, well, imagine the energy that already is, it's just transformed, that it maybe is more at your fingertips than you thought, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It reminds me, there's been, I say, a couple times in my life where I'll get an idea and I kind of just push it to the side, right? And then you're watching like infomercials at 2 a.m. and it's this multi-million-dollar product. And you're like, I thought of that like years ago, right? It's just one of those reinforcements that the energy of that thought, that ability, that product already existed, right? The difference between me and that person is they got that thought and they took action on it.
Right.
Right.
Well, yeah, and like in the let's see, the books I was reading, I can't remember now who it was, but they talk about all of the major inventors, and just it all came from imagination. It all came from something that felt like nothing, and they just kept imagining. And the one story in particular I was thinking about was Ford, how he kept saying, I'm gonna cover the earth with these automobiles, and no one believed him, and that he paid his scientists to keep doing something that they kept telling him was impossible. And he said, that's okay, you just stay right here and I'll keep paying you until you figure out the impossible. Keep
Yeah.
expanding your imagination. We're not getting stopped by this limited belief that it's impossible. And then, finally they got to the point where they figured it out, something that it took years, and he was just putting his money into this thing that everyone said was impossible. And finally, they figured it out. And
Yeah.
that over and over and over again, you know, these people that these house known brand names, products, things that we just think were, when you listen to their stories, just about all of them were told, you can't do it, it's impossible. And they use their imagination,
Yeah.
which I think should encourage us that it wasn't just them, wasn't just that they were lucky or that they had money. A lot of them were broke or got broke 10 times. There's an element of using our imagination and tapping into the energies that have not died but transformed, right?
Yeah. It's one where um, this is one of like my favorite stories of Tony Robbins. Is he was, I think he was down to his last $7. He saw a little boy, I think he said like 7, 8 years old, taking his mom out to lunch, and right, he gave that little boy his last $7, right? Because in his mind, he knew he was going to get more money, right? And this is where I find a lot of us get stuck with our imagination. We go into it with fear. We go into that going, wow, I'm going to have to lose so much.
And that's really
And
hard. That's
it's
really a hard leap for most people.
really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. But at the same time, if we can go into it with love and faith, right? Not faith in a godly sense, but a faith that the dots will connect in the future to make the complete picture. It was one where I was actually, I forget who I was talking with. Um, when I said that, they were like, it's like those pictures we used to do as a child where it would have number 1 all the way up to maybe like number 50. And you would just look at the dots going, I don't know what it is. And then you would get like halfway, then you'd be like, oh, I think I see it coming together. And
I
you would be
remember
amped.
those.
Yeah, you'd be amped to go, let me get the rest of the way. And then you're like, there it is.
Yeah.
Right. The picture was always there, but it was just the dots. And it's not until we can connect the dots really just one at a time.
Yeah.
Right. You can't just go from 1 to 10. You just connect them one at a time, knowing that they're going to connect to a complete picture at the end.
Yeah.
And I thought that was like one of the most amazing things, because I find it to be very true, is the faith is just knowing that when you get to the next dot, even if you don't see the full picture, when it gets to the end, you will see the full picture.
Well, and I think, the other part that I want to mention that I've heard in these books that I've been reading and listening about, is there's a risk factor, right? And so there are certain people that are more open and willing and comfortable to risk things. Now, it's way less risky to connect some dots on a piece of paper, and if you mess up, it's no big deal, than it being your life, being your livelihood, being your savings account. So I'd love to talk a bit about like limited beliefs, fears, not being able to take risks, and how that kind of ties in with imagination, maybe in ways that it could help be an antidote to help and convincing yourself you can.
Yeah. So like, there are big things that are big risks, right? Where when we think about it, it's all fear-based as a umbrella term, right? It's fear-based stuff that holds us back. And so when we think of stuff we're afraid of, we either don't fully understand it, right? Which means we need to learn something more. We don't actually have a solid plan, right? Where we get to go, once I do step A, I get to move to step B, get to step C, right? And we're gonna wing it, right? Which makes it easy for fear. Or it's not really something we see as rewarding as we want it to be, and that is one where I think is big for a lot of people because it. I'll say something. I had a client earlier where he was talking about going to Mexico, right? And him and his family, I think it was something like $10,000 for his whole family to go to Mexico. And he was like, "It's just not worth it for me to put 10 grand in, right? Just to put money aside for it, right? It's not worth the reward of getting there." Okay, right? For him, he will never make that sacrifice of putting money aside every week, every month, however he would do it to get the reward, right? And so we get to look at stuff like that and really be honest with ourselves of, do I not really see or really want the reward of it? Do I need to learn something, right, to have a clearer picture? Or do I just got to use my knowledge and stuff to create steps to get there, right? Because then it's not going, how do I get from step 1 to Z or A to Z? It's how do I get from A to B? Okay, now that's a lot easier than B to C, right? And trusting the process in that way that eventually when you get to Z, it will be a complete picture.
So what happens when fear is in the way, um, or uh, you know, not being comfortable with risk?
You you really have to look at yourself in that moment, right? Because in our everyday life, there is always risks for everything, right? Some risk we naturally or instantly go, it's worth the reward, right? So, like a risk, let's say for me, is I walk down the street to the gas station to maybe buy a drink. Well, walking down the street has an incurred risk. I could get hit by a car. A wild animal could come out and jump me, right? Or I could get jumped by someone else. Like these are inherent risks. But my mind goes, well, the reward of just getting there is going to make me healthier. I'm going to get my drink. I'm going to get my exercise in. Automatically outweighs that risk, you know? And so when we have things in life that we're going, wow, like this is a huge risk, sometimes it's, well, yeah, life is risky, right? I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. I don't know what next week's going to bring. That's an inherent risk that I automatically have to take, even if I decide I don't want to. I'm going to wake up tomorrow, right? And next week and next month. And so we get to look at the risk and go, is this risk really worth the reward that I have convinced myself is on the other side? You know?
So, what are some ways to, when we're talking about, and we're going to have to just talk more about imaginative play and imagination next week and maybe even the next week. But, like, what are some concrete steps for using your own imagination and imaginative play to get yourself to where you want to be, and that convincing yourself that you can?
Yep. So the very first thing is having that outcome, right? Wherever it is. And there's no dream too big. There's definitely too small dreams, but there's no dream too big,
Well, last
right?
week you said whatever dream you have, double
Double
it,
it.
and then you might just get halfway, because if you just have that one dream, that has some of your limited beliefs there.
Yep.
So it seems like the very first step is to figure out where you want to be and double that.
And double it.
Okay.
Right.
And how do you find that or figure it out? Like, what's that
Yeah. So
process?
so certain things are pretty easy, right? So there's certain things like people who go, I want to make 10 grand a month, right? It's easy to double. It's 20 grand, right? When it comes to let's say a house, right? I want a house, um, maybe that's 5 rooms, 2 bathrooms, whatever. Double it. No, it's going to be a mansion. It's going to have 10 rooms. It's going to have 5 bathrooms. It's going to have a lake and a moat, right? Whatever. Granite countertops, right? You just get to make it more intense, right? And believe it or not, when we dream, it should make us feel uneasy, because who we are is not the person that can acquire that, because otherwise we already would have it.
I love that. I feel like we should just sit on that for a second. So, who we are right now is not who need it we need to be in order to get to that place. And that's why we're doing the work. right? Because then that
Right.
work is where you are now, doing that imagination to develop who you need to be in order to get that, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right. And that is like super like because this is where a lot of people I can get hung up on it. They go, yeah, but I can't do that. Well, no, who you are now doesn't have the knowledge, the experience, the ability, but who you become does.
Right.
Right. And so it should feel a little uncomfortable, a little uneasy, a little like, oh man, like, am I being selfish for wanting that? Yeah, that's good. Have those feelings, right?
Right.
Because then when you get there, it's one where you along that journey you will learn so much that your ultimate dream will change, right? You may go into it going, wow, like, you know, having that house with 10 rooms really for what I want. I don't want the 10 rooms. I want a barn, right? It'll change. It won't get smaller. It'll just change, right? And you'll find as you'll go on, you'll go, wow, like, yeah, that would be nice to, yeah, I can do that to, wow, like it's starting to come in, you know, it, at a basic level, what we're doing is we're training our mind to observe certain things, right? So opportunity is one I have learned is always around us. But the thing is, if we're not looking for the opportunity, it will pass us by. It does not stop just because we're not ready, right? It will pass us by. But when we're open, going, I'm looking for these opportunities, they always present themselves. And we're ready to grab onto them in that moment because that's what we're looking for. You
Right.
know, and so when we start doing that, and the opportunity could be learning a course, it could be continuing education, it could just be like, you know what, I believe in myself more, right? I notice the way I interact with people has changed, and how I talk to myself has changed, or about myself has changed, right? Those could be just the opportunities, right? Where if I look at my own life, like one of the first big opportunities for me was when someone said, "Hey, Pete, you did a great job." It wasn't, it's no big deal. It was a thank you for recognizing that, right? Taking my credit where credit
Yeah.
was due,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's
Yeah. That
natural.
validation.
Yeah, it's natural for us to go, no, it's no big deal, when
Yeah.
it really is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, someone else took time out of their day to acknowledge our success. That's big. That's an opportunity coming, going, you're worth it, right? You're worthy of where you're going. Keep doing it, right? And so if we treat it as less than, we're missing out on making ourselves better.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. So, all right, let's take a few more minutes before we end for today. And I'll start because I have something in my mind, but I thought each of
yeah,
us could give a solid example of something that someone could do daily or weekly. So I'm going to give something daily that was shared to me by someone that's a practitioner that I respect. So what she said is that 6 times a day for 60 seconds, you take time to find one thing that brings you joy. And that can literally be something in your room. If you're just in your room and you're looking around and saying, nothing brings me joy, well, there's something there that you put there or that you've kept and haven't thrown away for some reason. Or it could be outside in a flower or cloud. Just find something. Set your clock and just fully pay attention to it and just feel the beauty, just enjoy it without thinking, without making anything extra. 60 seconds, just focus your complete attention to this thing that brings you joy. And then just let that 60 seconds go. And afterwards, you can notice what came to mind. And if you want to write it down, you might find some insights that way. So 6 times a day, every day, 60 seconds, stare completely with all of your focus into something that brings you joy and notice what comes. And there's many aspects to what this does. Um, but partly is when we're in joy, this is apparently one of the highest resonating frequencies. Just obviously when you're in a state of pain, it's a very different feeling than when you're happy or enjoying something. So just to bring yourself there, and it connects to that idea of what you're saying of where we put our focus, like what we focus on, what we notice. You used a different word. um I'm spacing out on it at the moment, but
Mm.
if we have opportunities, we often will see um what's bad. We'll often just focus on all the stuff that's bad and everything, but we can also see that opportunities are always there. It just depends on what we focus on. So by doing this, we are giving our brain a exercise to focus on joy, and then let the body feel joy for 60 seconds. So that's the one that I have to share today.
I like that one.
Nice. Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Because, yeah, I say my big one is giving justification for everything you do to move towards who you are becoming.
I
Right.
love that.
Because that is one where so many times I feel like in our own lives, and this was a big one for me, was things would happen and I would be like, oh, that just happened. But if I went, no, this happened because I'm going here. Now it has purpose, right? Now it's a lesson that I really learned from. And it helped me take everything that's happened in my life to realize, yeah, of course I'm moving in the right direction because I'm learning all these lessons, these experiences that maybe I would have let pass me by, right? And so when we can give justification, and justification is going, hey, me getting up at 6 a.m. helps me because, right, the magic word of because, it means I got more time to study something, to meditate, to do yoga, to move in that direction, right? To bring in a new client, to be a good father, whatever we want to put behind it. But whatever we put behind it needs to be what we're moving towards.
So then what is the concrete thing to do? Can you give like
Yep.
an exercise?
So it's with every decision you make, justify it with how it's going to help you get to where you're going. Right? Down to the clothes you wear, to the drinks you choose, right? Once you start justifying it, you will stop doing things that are keeping you where you were, right?
I really hear that. Yeah, when you say it, when you say that, that's what I hear on the back end.
Yeah. So like, let's say like I was getting healthy, right? And I'm like, oh, I'm drinking this soda because I can't think of a good justification for it. So if I am
Yes, I
becoming
want
healthy,
to.
yeah, right. But because you want to doesn't help you get healthy,
Exactly.
right? And so if your goal is to get healthy and you look at that and you go, no, well, I'm going to grab this water now because that gets me healthy,
Right.
right?
Love
Those
that.
those things that you can't justify to go in that direction will stop,
Yeah.
right? Because you're kind of confronting the monster of, no, this is hurting me. This is keeping me here. I don't want this to keep me here. You're gone,
Yeah.
right?
All right. Well, so that's great. Those are two great exercises that
Yeah.
I definitely will use for myself and use with my clients. And anyone and everyone who's listening today and will be listening later, I hope that you try some of those exercises and see what comes and let us know. You can private message either of us or comment on any of the channels that it's on. And until then, we will talk to you guys next week. Have a great week. Bye.
Bye.